Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the January Building and Realty Institute of the Hudson Valley. Is that now our name, Tim?
Officially.
Officially, the name of the BRI is now the Building and Realty Institute of the Hudson Valley. Let's hear a hand for that, all right? Long time coming. No confusion in there. Anyways, I'm Michael Murphy. I'm the president of the Building and Realty Institute. That's why I'm up here. And welcome all of you. And those of you that are kind of commemorating dry January, you only have 9 more days to go. The rest of you, I think the bar is still open. So, anyways, for the past 2 years, we've been simulcasting, broadcasting on social media. This year, we're switching from Facebook to YouTube. And you know why? Because videos disappear on Facebook after 30 days. We are on the cutting edge. So if you want to watch this, it's going to be on YouTube. Also, we extend our welcome to anybody that's watching right now live. Wait for them. Hello. Or we'll be watching in a few days. This format helps people stay connected. Members that have unexpected conflicts or unable to attend in person because of health or safety concerns. Because no one wants to come to Harrison. Can you believe it? The safety kids are knocked out for Harrison. Anyways, before we get to tonight's program, I want to get everyone warmed up with our audience participation. I'm reading through the lines over here. Once again, it's time for the Salad Spinner of Destiny. Now, the way this works, it's really complicated. I spin it, pick a card, that person comes up and does like a 30-second infomercial on their company, and if it's more than 30 seconds, I get them. So, and the one that gives the best presentation gets the salad spinner, right? No.
They get do business, that's what they get.
Gary, everybody knows you, Gary Klein. You're not going to get picked. I see your comment. Okay. I'm doing this blindfold. Ready? Here's the person. From Colado Engineering, Miguel. Where are you? That's right. Front center, Miguel. Front center.
30 seconds, that's quick.
Hello, I'm Miguel Engineering. I'm a principal at Colado Engineering. What we do is we do MEP. What is MEP? We do the stuff that makes that moves in the building. So the HVAC, plumbing, electrical. Of course, we're focused on energy as well. That's a big part. There's a lot of stuff going on in Albany and all over New York City. We do not push electrification. That's not right for you. Gas is still really great. I'm a plumbing engineer, so I love the gas. But we're going to do what's right for you. So.
Come on, give him a better hand than that. This guy's an engineer. That was a pretty good presentation for him. He's like a banker. Let's see. Who do we have here? Numbers. Aren't you having a good time this week? Okay. From Newmark, who's your Billy Joe Brunetti? All right. Billy Joe. Okay, anybody want to be Billy Joe?
I got it.
Well, Phil,
I got it.
you want to come do it?
No, I'll do it right from here. You can hear me, right? I'm sure.
You got to stand up, bro. That's it. Now we can hear you now.
So Billy Joe's my guest.
Oh, nice.
And Billy Joe, he has a little sore throat, so I'll speak. Billy Joe works for Newmark, the building manager, mostly commercial. Very great. She runs some of the best buildings she runs. If anybody wants to do, be a vendor or anybody else, come see Billy after this, and she'll put you on your vendor list. How's that? There you go.
Isn't that great? People helping people in the BRI. Thank you, Phil. That was great. Now, aren't you having fun? This is going to be you next, so swallow quickly. You get a chance here. Ready? Okay. Who has a shiny card? Here it is. The person from Anango Cleaning Systems. Good. Yes. He was a sponsor at the BOMA meeting last week there. Good for you, man.
I can talk to you again.
Took me 30 seconds to get up here.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. I want to thank a few people here, Ron, Phil, yourself. My name is Jonathan. I work for and own actually a commercial cleaning company here in the Westchester County, Hudson Valley area. We are full service, and that being said, I have cleaned toilets myself, that being said. So, Love to entertain anybody who wants to come up and talk to me thereafter. I'm very happy to be here my first time, so thank you for having me, and love to come back.
All right, so those of you whose card didn't get picked, you can give your 30-second speech to each other. I'll give you 30 seconds, so go ahead. You didn't want to do it, did you? All right, okay. Good. Okay, all right. Where are we now? I lost my place on this thing. Okay, so here we are. All right, first of all, we'd like to recognize, last year we started an ambassador program in the BRI, and the idea of doing the ambassador program was to ensure that new members maximize the use of the BRI extensive benefits, and there are a lot of them. You can see them on our website. By guiding new members through our resources and programs, ambassadors will empower these new members to fully engage with everything the BRI has to offer, plus it gives them a friendly face to look forward to seeing at BRI events. With those friendly faces in the crowd, those ambassadors, please stand up. All right, who's an ambassador here? All right, thank you. Thank you for your service. Okay. All right, now, so if you're new in the audience, raise your hand one more time. Just raise your hand, stand up. Just raise your hand. See those hands up there if you're new to the place? Like the guy that just spoke here from the cleaning company. Right there, the guy who washes the toilets. That guy. Okay. See the ambassadors there, you want to talk to them. Okay, thank you. Now, if you want to be an ambassador or BRI ambassador, there's a lot of benefits to being an ambassador. You want to talk to Anika. This is right over here. Anika's our communications director who's coordinating that program and doing a bang-up job. Okay. Third, I'd like to quickly mention our upcoming meetings. As you can tell, the BRI is tirelessly producing thought-provoking, that's right, thought-provoking programs and discussions, training on important topics and opportunities to network and to grow your business. Here are some that we have on the schedule already. Next Wednesday, January, and remember, if you're the member of one, you're a member of all of them. You go to any of these meetings. So, next Wednesday, January 28th, the Cooperatives and Condominiums Advisory Council, or the CCAC, will host their membership meeting at 6:30 on Zoom. The food is going to be awesome. It's on Zoom. It's a joke. Okay. The topic will be subletting what your board needs to know, sponsored by Airbnb. That's a joke. Actually, that should be a good topic. Anyways, the week after that, on Thursday, February 5th, we will have a training session on the new building and energy codes that New York State implemented at the end of this year. This program is designed for professionals across the residential construction industry. Builders, remodelers will gain the clarity needed to ensure projects comply with the new codes. Subcontractors and suppliers will learn how the changes impact material systems and building practices, while code officials will strengthen their understanding of the requirements now in effect, and that'll be at 12 noon at the Hotel MTK in Mount Kisco. Anybody that's planning on doing developing a building, it might be good for you too to know how the codes have changed. Anyways, you know who you are. Okay, now if you also say the date for March 6th, that's when we're doing our annual legislative breakfast on Tuesday. The legislative breakfast is on March 6th. Where's it going to be today?
Right, it's going to be at Molino's at Lakon.
That is a knock. Then I can't miss the event. That's going to be great. And it's on a Friday.
Yeah.
And then Tuesday, March 10th, we have our next lunch meeting for the Hudson Valley Women in Construction. Any members here in the Hudson Valley Women in Construction? No, I thought I saw Kathy. Where's Kathy Hoffman? She was here, right?
Just stepped out for a minute.
Oh, see, they're always busy, man. Those people are always networking. So that's a great group. And the only way that you can attend that room is if you are a Hudson Valley woman in construction. So you got it, right? Okay. Don't have to explain anymore. Okay, new events are being added all the time, so please keep checking your emails and online at thevillageinstitute.org/events. Finally, can anyone tell me what happened on February 11th, 1946? Day that lived in infamy. Anybody know? Not you, Jeff. Not you, Jeff. Anybody else? February 11th, 1946. Vinny, past president Vinny Ruderati. You can answer that. Any past presidents in the room of the BRI? Let's say a lot of. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, the BRI was founded. That means we're celebrating our 80th anniversary this year. Ken Nielsen will be there, right? It's going to be great. Yeah, it's going to be dancing. It's going to be fantastic. We have a lot planned this year, and a number of special announcements will be about that. So be on the lookout on social media and in your inboxes for breaking news as we celebrate this special milestone. Now, the man you've been waiting for, I'm going to turn it over to Tim Foley to introduce tonight's program. Thank you.
So, one more time, please give it up for our president, Michael Murphy. Happy New Year, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I am Tim Foley. I'm the CEO of the Building and Realty Institute. I'm also the Executive Director of Building and Allied Construction Industries of Westchester, which is the local affiliate for the National Association of Home Builders, New York State Builders Association, and I am also the Ed McMahon to Michael Murphy's Johnny Carson. That was great, sir. So I'm here to introduce tonight's program. Before we do that, I just want to reference several pieces of paper that are currently at your place. You will hear throughout the year about the benefit that members have access to, including safety group insurance through Levitt Burks, and including our new partnership with Slattery Energy Consulting for energy audits. Information on that is at your places. We have a new sponsor who has decided to sponsor all of our general membership meetings this year. That is Approved Oil. So I would like to welcome up Ron Tesler for a quick 30 seconds. Hey, Ron!
Hey, thank you first off to everyone, Tim and Michael and everyone here at the BRI. This is a wonderful organization. I'm really happy to be part of it. I make great connections and just wonderful people. Real quick, Approved Oil is a 90-plus-year-old fuel oil and service provider company. We're headquartered in Brooklyn, union shop, privately owned, and we have such a huge fleet of trucks and employees. We're really set up for a sustained cold snap like this. We deliver oil 24/7. I'm reachable 24/7, 2 cell phones. But I just wanted to say thank you, and I'm really excited to be partnered with the BRI this year. All right, have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ron. I'd like to ask the speakers to come up to the panelist table, and while they're doing so, I'll just remark, there should be surveys at your places. Please give us your feedback on this program, including making suggestions about future programs. We do read through all of them and take those suggestions very much to heart. All right, a couple of connections between myself personally and some of what you have heard or are about to hear. Much like one of our successful participants in the Salad Spinner of Destiny, I also had a job where I had to clean toilets. In fact, it's a little similar to this job. There's a little less ground to deal with in this current job, so that's a positive. You're moving forward. Also, 50 years ago, I was born, and also 50 years ago, the State Environmental Quality Review Act was passed, and that is the topic for the rest of the evening. This landmark law required all local, regional, and state government agencies to equally examine the environmental impacts along with the social and economic considerations for a project or action that was within their discretion to review. Those of us who have worked in housing know that sometimes the best of laws with best intentions can easily over time warp into something that is relatively unrecognizable. We have an all-star panel tonight to help us walk us through some of that history, how it currently plays out in a housing context, but even more interesting, how this may well be a year of reform at the state level when it comes to SECRA, as well as housing, infrastructure, and clean energy. With the greater New York area still clawing its way out of the severe housing shortage, and with SECRA increasingly being used to, in some cases, slow down climate-friendly projects, including renewable energy, transit-oriented development, and other types of infill or adaptive reuse housing proposals, there's been growing interest from the governor and from the legislature and from our peer states to provide exemptions for a fixed time frame under SECRA for projects that are likely to be net benefits to the environment, including these types of housing. Here to help us walk us through where we've been, where we are today, and where we may be over the course of this year. We are joined by Bruno Schickel, who is the president of NISBA and founder and owner of Schickel Construction Company, Peter Farreau, who is vice president for planning and land development from AKRF, and Josh Berman, who's the campaigns manager for the Regional Plan Association. That's just their titles, but I wonder if you gentlemen would just take a couple of minutes just to explain a little bit more about your background.
Well, I'm Bruno.
There's a mic right in front of you.
Is this, yeah, it's on. I'm Bruno Schickel. I'm from the Ithaca, New York area. I grew up on a dairy farm up there, and I got into the building business very young, right out of high school, and I've been there ever since. And I develop tiny house communities that I own and rent. I've developed 3 of them, and I have a total of about 212 rental homes that have been very interesting, innovative, and quite beautiful. And I'm currently the president of the New York State Builders Association. I was president back in 1996 of the New York State Builders as well. And we got a great opportunity this year, we really do, on seeker among other things. And we're really pushing hard to make it more affordable to build and live in New York State. And that's really our focus, and that's our message. Thank you.
So I'm Peter Farreau. I'm with the firm AKRF. We are an environmental planning, engineering, and consulting firm with offices in New York City, White Plains, Stamford, and a couple other places. I'm an urban planner by day, that's my background, and by night, for those of you who go to planning board meetings. But really what I am is an advocate for great places to live. Communities that we want to live in, that are vibrant, that we can work in, that our kids can play in. And to do that, I'm an advocate for affordable housing, and I'm an advocate for environmental conservation. Seeker has, despite the fact that it's SECRA, I like to say, it's five letters, it really has become, to many people, a 4-letter word. But it really doesn't get enough credit either. It has done some amazing things. And when we look around our region, we can point to a number of them. When we look throughout the state, we can point to a number of them. But as Tim said, the original goal has sometimes fallen short in the way that we have implemented it. And so you'll hear from my remarks tonight that my big takeaways are that seeker reform is great. We actually have many of the tools to reform it already. But that at the end of the day, seeker is not a replacement for community planning. If we didn't have seeker, there'd probably be another way that communities would kind of exercise their voice. But we know that we can take incremental steps, and I think there are those steps we can take. But you'll hear a little bit more about that tonight.
Thank you, and I think anything that's 50 years old needs a little bit of maintenance, so I appreciate that. You all should know as people that work in construction. My name is Josh Berman. I'm the campaigns manager with Regional Plan Association. I'm originally from Long Island, so glad to be here with you all. It's a very friendly welcome from Westchester. And Regional Plan Association, we are a civic nonprofit. We're over 100 years old, and we focus on doing research, planning, and advocacy for the tri-state area. So we cover the 5 boroughs, but also Long Island, Westchester, parts of New Jersey and Connecticut, and even parts due north. I like to say, you know, wherever our commuter rail system goes, we go. And so, you know, it's good to be in Westchester talking about this. In my role, I'm the campaigns manager, and I do a lot of coalition work. And one of the coalitions that we have is our New York Neighbors Coalition. And that formed because of the huge housing shortage that we have in New York State. We do a lot of quality research at RPA, and we found that New York State needs over 800,000 new units to address housing affordability over the next 10 years, which is a crazy number to say out loud, And we are trying to lead up the coalition to really put a spotlight on that and try and make the changes that we know we need to get to that point. And it's a big battle, and I know that you all are very intimately aware of it, but I think secret is one aspect of it. We think of housing as sometimes a wicked problem with a lot of different things, but we are optimistic that some of the secret reforms this year could make a difference on housing affordability.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We're so thrilled to have you here with us tonight to share your experience and expertise. So let's get into it. Peter, when we're talking about SECRA, it was originally intended to apply to every governmental decision, more or less. Housing has been one of the more prominent ones for us here at the BRI, but it's across the board, and it has a greater or lesser extent depending upon the specific decision that the local body is trying to make. When it comes to how it was intended to be structured, how it was intended to proceed, what are the types of conversations or community considerations that it was trying to help raise to the surface when it came to housing decisions?
So, first and foremost, I think it was trying to raise the conversation of the physical environment. While the definition of the environment in the seeker statute is quite broad, and I think that was, there are benefits and there are drawbacks to that. It was thinking, are we putting housing in the right place? It was thinking, is there a wetland there? Is there a critical habitat? Are there threatened and endangered species? And, the legislature knew that, and the DEC implementing it knew that some projects were more likely than others to have impact, right? So SECR set up these two different classifications of projects, right? These type 1 projects, yeah, you might have a significant impact because they're bigger. They're just bigger projects. And then you have these type 2 projects. You know what? This type of project is so small, it couldn't possibly have a significant adverse impact. And then the third category is everything else. And so SECR has evolved over time to get away from just the physical environment, which again could be a very good thing. But what we see is that SECR's trying to make policy now. SECR's trying to talk about our infrastructure, not just do you have the capacity to hook up to a sewer system, but does your sewer system need to be rehabilitated all the way to the sewer treatment plant? That wasn't SECR's intention. And you could do that for any number, you could follow that logic for any number of characteristics. And I think one of the things that I come back to is SECR was supposed to sit on top of other regulations, right, in communities that had zoning, that had wetland ordinances, that had other things, try to coordinate them. Now that we have a lot of these regulations in this area, SECR kind of keeps looking for more and more. When I talk to my colleagues in upstate communities, and you were talking about it, Bruno, you work in communities, some of which don't have zoning. There are a lot of communities in this state that still don't have a zoning ordinance. SECR was the vehicle, is the vehicle that these communities use to review these projects. It's fundamentally different down here in the Hudson Valley. It's not the vehicle by which we review projects. We have site plan regulations, we have other regulations. And so what's happened is SECR has started to look at any change at all to anything is now considered this impact and maybe this adverse impact. And I don't think that's what SECR originally meant. I think SECR originally meant significant as in significant, big, different, unique, but now it's turning into any little change. And that's not the definition that allows us to evolve as a community and build the things that we want to build, housing included.
Bruno, we often hear the phrase in the housing context about a local community, neighborhood defenders, local activists, maybe a planning committee chair who's been there for a long period of time, maybe a trustee, of SECR being essentially quote unquote weaponized, such that the SECR process stops being about finding and mitigating potential environmental harms and really becomes about, in some ways transparently, trying to just stop the project in its tracks. Do you have some examples in broad strokes, that you've seen or heard of housing projects that have been caught up in this weaponization?
I'm not sure I have any great in specific examples, but I mean, clearly the process is broken. I mean, you know, projects, good projects get held up for years, if not decades. And this is crazy. I mean, we're really, you know, we're, as a state, we've got to fix this. If we need 800,000 housing units built in the next 10 years, the people in this room are the people that are going to do it. I mean, it's people like us. And we cannot spend a decade or two getting approval to make this happen. It's clear that the weaponization has taken place. And it's, if you think about it, what they've done is it's empowered anybody who wants to say no, and then to kill you with 1,000 cuts. And basically, we need to put rules in place that give communities the ability to say yes, and to sort of rebalance the situation between the people, people that are opposing and the people that are in support of it. Because we all need housing, we all live in a house, and we need to reinforce that and remind the legislators and the political leaders that that's the case. So I just think, again, the system's broken. As Peter said, it was never intended to dial down to, you know, this 1 acre lot someplace. That was not the intention. This was for significant, big things. And that's not how it's being used today.
Josh, RPA has really been a leader on quantifying the housing shortage that we're facing here within the greater New York City area, including with a report that they released with Westchester County Association that really put some hard numbers on how far short we're truly falling. You've also done a lot of research on what some of the drivers of that are. Can you talk a little bit about what your research has found in terms of the effects of SECRA?
Sure. I can talk about SECRA and some of the things that we have found, but actually one of the interesting things about SECRA is how devolved the administration of it is, and how difficult it can be to actually understand what the impacts are. Both because we can maybe, New York City is a really good example for us and has a lot of that data, but once you go outside, there aren't really centralized repositories that you can go to actually find the data. And it also isn't quantifying the projects that aren't put in because of the amount of time that it takes and the amount of potential burden and risk of litigation. So I can share a little bit, but I just want to caveat that and say the data is actually quite incomplete. With New York City as our one very well-documented example, and we have seen them go through and create a new regulatory process called the Green Fast Track Program, which helps speed up and exempt a number of middle to low-rise developments. And they were able to put that together because they could look back at all of the EISs that were done, all of the applications, and see that none of these buildings actually had an adverse environmental impact. And so I think that's heartening, and it kind of points to the fact that dense infill environmentally friendly housing is good for the environment just on its face. And so with SECRA kind of looking at the status quo as the ideal and thinking that any impact could be negative, you start picking at it. But I think potentially reforming to exempt housing does make a strong environmental case there. I also just want to point out CBC, the Citizen Budget Commission, they actually did some research on quantifying the costs of SECRA. And this is layered on top of some of the other discretionary reviews that happen in the city. But they found that these discretionary reviews added 11 to 16% to the cost of development. So there is a real impact, and it's having an impact on our ability to meet our housing crisis. So SECRA does have an impact. We can also talk about zoning. We can talk about all of those other things, but it is an important thing that we do need to change.
So Peter, you said tonight that communities actually have some of the tools already to have either a more efficient or more effective process at the local level. But we also know, because we've heard it actually often in this room with a member who couldn't join us tonight, that sometimes there's a housing project, all the local electeds love it, it's affordable housing, everyone thinks it's great, it doesn't actually need to be rezoned, but then the process winds up taking an incredibly long time and no one's quite sure why. So can you talk a little bit about why some of these tools at the local level might not be effectively used right now?
So I think there are a couple reasons. I think it all boils down, well, I think there are a couple reasons. One of the big ones, and I think in a situation like you were talking about, we're talking about capacity. Do the municipalities have the capacity to administer their regulations? And the answer is, in lots of places, no, they don't. And it's not because all the time because they don't want to. It's because they don't have the resources. It could be financial, it could be staff, it could be experts, but they don't have the capacity to get it done. However, it is rarely the case that seeker is the only reason that a project has a hard time getting through the process. We have set up a number of regulations and rules in our land use planning processes for very good reasons. And I'm the first to say I love my rules and regulations. You can take it out on me if you want. I like writing zoning. I think we can do this really well. But the fact of the matter is, when we layer on top over and over and over again and don't think about how these processes interact with each other or how they actually work for an individual project, it turns out sometimes communities simply don't know what the next step is. So there's the capacity issue, but there's also the planning issue. If you have elected officials, planning board members, zoning board members, architectural review board members who are all aligned and have bought into the community's plan, the community's desires, and you have zoning that reflects that, you have a comprehensive plan that reflects that, all of a sudden these conversations become a lot easier. When there's discord, when we're not sure, then it becomes a lot harder. And we have enough opportunities in our processes for people to slow it down, to make their own individual voices heard, because they haven't felt that they've been heard, or they don't know what the plan is. And so we have the tools, and we'll talk about it a little later. There are communities that have done this well. Big communities, small communities that have done this well. So we know it can be done. It's the matter of actually doing it.
Bruno, NISBA has been working on this, on particular types of seeker reforms for years, and there are two dominant themes in some of its advocacy work. One of which is that the process itself ought to be a little bit more predictable and within a constrained time frame for certain types of projects, sort of a shot clock for a review process that not only can take a long time, but also not take a long time. It's clouded in terms of uncertainty, in terms of how we'll apply in a particular project. And then the second one is what Peter was talking about, moving some projects from a type 1 consideration where it has to undergo a full environmental review to a type 2, because we're relatively certain that it's going to be more modest. Can you explain what the case NISBA and others have been making as to why we need reforms in that sort of area?
Sure. So basically right now, as Peter said at the beginning, describing, there's a type 1 list. If you're a community under 150,000 people and you're doing a housing development over 100 units, you're automatically a type 1. But if you're under, there's a question mark of whether whether you have to have the review or not. NISBA is proposing and suggesting that if you're under that 100 units in a city, a municipality under 150,000 people, that you would automatically be a type 2, which is exempt. And basically the concept is that more projects, if you really want to fix the problem and you really want to get velocity in housing going, more projects have got to move into the exempt category. I mean, the bottom line is, you know, we know what the impact is on a 100-unit subdivision. It's not rocket science. I mean, we can pretty much predict it. We don't need 10 years to examine it and look at it. And basically, the governor's proposal that she just made in her budget is, I would say, an initial step in that direction. She is saying 100 units or less in cities under 1 million people, or municipalities under 1 million, which would be outside New York City, would move into the type 2 category, type 2 exempt. But then she puts on a lot of requirements that it has to be existing disturbed land. It can't be, you know, and so then the question is, what does that mean in disturbed land, already disturbed land? And so the devil's going to be in the details on that, and we're working on that. But the concept is, and there seems to be gaining steam. Rachel May, the senator, put a bill out, and it was passed by the state senate last year. It didn't go any place in the assembly, but where she was putting more projects into the type 2 category. And they're realizing that they got a problem, that every good project is being held up with a lot of litigation or just dragging the process out, and that it has to be addressed. My concern, quite honestly, is, and you've kind of alluded to it, that if the tool to slow up and prevent a project of using seeker is taken away, a community is going to be tempted to basically put in more restrictive zoning. They're going to retool their zoning law to prevent, you know, things, and get very fearful, and so they'll really tighten up their zoning law, which I think would be a bad outcome as well. So that's why I think that the governor, and we're going to advocate that they need to combine the seeker reform with zoning reform. They have, the governor started what they call, she calls the pro-housing communities thing, where you can, a municipality, if they become a pro-housing community, can get access to apply for certain funds for certain projects. So she dangles some money out there, but she doesn't ask the community to do anything. And what we're advocating is that she says, if you want to be a pro-housing community, it has to mean something, and you have got to begin the process of reforming your zoning to basically enable builders to build the housing that everybody universally says they need. And so if these two things went together, I think we could have a very positive outcome and combination, and that's what we're going to be advocating for.
Yeah, we'll do a little bit more of a deep dive into the governor's proposal in just a little bit, but Josh, I know that there was actually been some polling done on this. Global Strategy Group came out with a poll looking at a number of different avenues for reform. Can you tell us what they found?
Yes, and actually just before I get into the poll, I do want to say on the environmental review versus zoning front, I see zoning as a city's values or a town's values, and I see seeker as a way to be measuring the impact to the environment. And I think it's good to separate those two things. And so in making the reforms, if a community does decide to tighten up their zoning, that's on them, and I think like as a coalition with New York neighbors, that's not something that we support, but that's at least a debate that we can have and be having that in the political sphere. And I think it's good to be taking away dense infill housing that we know is environmentally friendly from having to go through the seeker process and would be a benefit just in terms of like rules and order. But to go to the polling, we have been working with Open New York, who commissioned this poll from GSG. They found a lot of things that I think you will find actually pretty unsurprising. The first unsurprising thing that you will find is that most people don't know what seeker or secret is. They have never heard about this and don't have that much familiarity with it. If you give a prompt to people about what seeker is, just generally, people are mildly favorable about it. But if you ask people what their number one concern is right now, it's housing. And that's, over 80% of people are labeling that as a concern. And so, when we talk about what potential reforms could be to actually allow for more affordable housing, you see support for seeker reform really jumping up. So 63% of people support the reforms similar to what the governor is proposing. And I think even more notably, only 17% of people oppose. So it's a very, very small minority of people that actually want to keep these laws in place. And then furthermore, if you dig deeper into the polling and ask whether people would support a politician that supports these proposals, it's very, very popular. And so we see this as a potential win for the governor and for the legislature to take on, to be cutting red tape, but actually addressing a core concern that people have, which is the cost of housing.
So Peter, let's underline a couple of things we've said, just to make sure it's very clear. So we're talking just about the environmental review piece of it, but there's a lot more that goes into the application and the approval and the amount of local control that a municipality has on a housing project, right?
Quite a lot. Yeah, and I'm just gonna have to disagree a little bit with the folks on my left and right here. Seeker gets implemented at the local level in your community every day by a planning board, a zoning board, the board of trustees. They are the same people that write your zoning. They're the same people that size your infrastructure, that sweep your streets, that decide whether you should build sidewalks or not, that set speed limits. They're making the same decisions. Seeker doesn't sit out there as the boogeyman, that if we could just slay the boogeyman, it would be okay. Yes, there are examples, and lots of examples, of third parties coming out and challenging a project that everyone supported, and they're challenging it through seeker. Absolutely, we need to deal with that, and we need to take that seriously, take that threat away. But municipalities have the ability right now to exempt certain projects from seeker. I live in the village of Tarrytown. The village of Tarrytown could say, every single project within this downtown area does not need an environmental review because there's no natural environment left. We could say it. We could say it tomorrow, right? So could any of the communities that you live in, but we don't say it. And we don't say it for a number of different reasons. So, in addition to seeker, we have zoning. Zoning is the third rail of local politics, as we found out, 2 years ago? You go after zoning, and boy, people think you are taking away their right to own a dog or something. I don't know. It's pretty amazing when in reality, if you dig into zoning, if you're really kind of nerdy about it like me, you realize the state is the one that actually granted the municipality zoning power in the first place, so you can't really take away something that you gave. But anyway, I digress. But municipalities have all of this control. And so I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit, Tim, and I'm sorry. There are communities that have taken the bull by the horns and said, we're going to fix a bunch of these process problems at once, right? Everyone likes to talk about New Rochelle, and for good reason. New Rochelle did a bunch of great things. And everyone says, wow, they did this GEIS, this generic environmental impact statement, and that is what fixed the problem. And as a planner who writes environmental impact statements, I can say, yeah, that was a great document, right? I wish I was the author of that document. I wasn't. But that was not all that New Rochelle did. New Rochelle had a GEIS as part of this large planning process that re-envisioned what their downtown was going to be, that had lots of community involvement, that rewrote their zoning, that rewrote the rules of their industrial development agency, and aligned all of their permitting so that you could go through 1, 2, 3. You didn't have to get this permit, then go to someone else and get that, and go to someone else and get that. Oh, and by the way, at the same time, they hired staff, and they trained their staff. And now their staff can review these applications. So it turns out they did kind of everything, soup to nuts, and that's why it worked. Like it or don't like the towers, I don't care. They got it done. Other municipalities have done similar things. Village of Portchester rezoned their downtown. They did a GEIS. They finished right when COVID hit. They couldn't hire staff. They couldn't train their staff and bring in. And so what happened? Those projects that were approved took a lot longer to get implemented. They're getting there, right? If you've been to downtown Portchester, you see a couple of them going up. There are thousands of more units in the queue. But one little piece does not solve everything. So I don't want to say that seeker reform is not important, because it is. I think it's incredibly important. I think it is one piece in the puzzle, and I think the reforms that were proposed by the governor so far this year have been really interesting in that they are a nudge. They are a push in a direction, right? They add these shot clocks. But if you read the fine print to kind of how long these reviews could take, it turns out the lead agencies can kind of extend them, right? Well, she did that on purpose, right? She gave them the out, but there's still a nudge. And now all of a sudden, builders and developers can come in and they can say, municipality, you're not acting fairly, right? It doesn't have to be the outside group saying you didn't do your environmental review. They could say, hey, you extended this for no good reason. As many of you know, you can't do that now in seeker, right? It doesn't give you the opportunity to file that lawsuit, to threaten that lawsuit. Now you'd be able to. So she really is nudging this process forward. And in my opinion, you know, this is part of the problem of being a planner. I think she's nudging communities towards planning more and integrating these different topics.
So I do have one anecdote from a public hearing that I was at, where I was not the recipient of vitriol, but we did have an awful lot of people who were yelling at a particular state elected during the debate around the housing compact. You state people have to keep your hands off my seeker. It's the state environmental quality review. So it's a little bit reminiscent of the keep your government hands off my Medicare signs that we saw
It is.
about 10 years ago.
And not to, I'll say one last thing, and then I'm going to stop and let my colleagues speak, but one of the things that Seeker did and has done very well is it's given the public an opportunity to participate in the process. Again, like it or not, the public has been given a chance to participate. If you take that away and don't give it to them somewhere else, it's not going to matter. So we need to take the good things about Seeker, build it into another process so that there is actual planning.
So let's get into the specifics of what the governor proposed. She said some stuff in the State of the State. The rhetoric was very nice, but as we've heard many times, the devil's in the details. We actually got to see, with the release of the budget bill on Tuesday, what specifically is on the table, or at least what her starting point is. So Peter, I am actually going to stick with you on this one because you referenced the time frames. Let's do a little bit of a deeper dive. Can you explain the time frame for environmental impact statements for housing under SECRA? What is the 1 year, what is the 2 year, and how is that at all different from what we currently have?
So currently there are no time frames for when you need to complete seeker. Governor's proposing you need to make the determination, the first determination in seeker is, will the project have a significant adverse impact, or actually does it have the potential to have a significant adverse impact or not? This is your neg deck versus pos deck. You have to make that decision within a year. So a lot of projects don't write an environmental impact statement, and they take years to go through the process, and everyone blames it on seeker because, little known fact, your application isn't complete until seeker is complete. So, hey, if you don't complete seeker, your application is not complete. We don't have to do any other timeline. So, Governor said no more, make that decision within a year. If you're gonna write an environmental impact statement, you need to have it finished within 2 years. That's a big change. Right now, I tell my clients, if they want an EIS, they all say, great, can I do it in 6 months? And I laugh. And they say, how about 12? And I say, And so we say 18 to 24 months. Because anything more than 24 months scares the crap out of people, right? So we try not to do that. But the reality is, there are very few places where an EIS gets done in 2 years. Harrison happens to be one of them where it does. And one of the reasons is, what? Well, one of the reasons is that they have the capacity. They have great staff. They have boards that understand what they're doing. They're thoughtful. And this isn't a knock on other boards, but they've been through it. They know how to do it. They know what they're focusing on to get it done. But the governor is now saying, all right, the rest of you figure it out and get it done. And that's really the biggest, in my opinion, the biggest proposal that she has.
And does that apply only to particular types of housing projects, or is that applying across the board?
I honestly don't remember. So if someone read the law more recently than me, please let me know.
Moderator's privilege is across the board.
Okay.
So,
Woo!
yes, so that is a very big change, and that is something that could affect really quite a number of projects. Then there is a second set of reforms that specifically has to do with what California called infill in their law, what Massachusetts talked about within their regulations, what Bruno referenced earlier about previously developed land. Josh, can you talk specifically about the exemption moving to a type 2 type scenario for infill and how they're defining it?
Yes, this is where I get to go into the fine print of the law. If you were able to comb through the governor's budget document, or if you had Tim actually just send you the little subsection, it does define what these exemptions look like. And I'll just say the spirit of the law is to be focusing this housing in infill areas. So in urbanized areas that have already seen development, to be kind of pushing on that environmental, friendly and like non-impact element. But then it comes down to, what is the fine print? And so they created a new definition, which is called previously disturbed land. And that's land that has been developed prior to 2 years before the application for the permit. It's land that has either buildings or structures or some sort of improvement, even maintained lawns or public utilities. Just has to have something on it. As long as it's also not in a 100-year floodplain, and there hasn't been any major agriculture in 3 of the last 5 years, that parcel will count as previously disturbed. If it's falling within that infill designation, the governor then puts forward a few different caps around which types of housing would be exempt through a type 2. So for in any city that has over 1 million people, spoiler, that's only New York City. If the building is in previously disturbed land, which basically all of New York City is, and not in a floodplain or a coastal flooding zone, then there would be an exemption for developments with 250 or fewer units in lower density areas in the city, up to 500 units in medium and high density areas. If you are not in New York City, there is a smaller exemption for 100 or fewer units anywhere outside of New York City. And these developments also need to be connected to water and sewer and located on previously disturbed land. There's an allowance for some amount of mixed-use development within that. I believe it's 50,000 square feet or below. And those are the new regulations that apply to housing proposed.
Okay. And so, again, you would qualify for the exemption, but it's just on the secret piece. If you need to do a rezoning, we're not talking about that. If there's a problem with the way you design the building with the local board of architectural review, we're not talking about that either. We are just talking about whether it has to go through the full environmental impact statement process or not, right?
Correct.
So Bruno, we've talked a little bit about the Rachel May bill. And the Rachel May bill, which she's a state senator, it passed through the state Senate. It did a lot of the similar things, but it actually had more of a tiered approach. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that meant? Because I know NISBA has been very involved in support of that bill.
Yeah, the Rachel May bill, she had a stepped up basis so that if you were a community of less than 90,000 and you were doing 100 units or less, that would be exempt. If you were a community of over, then it stepped up. So she was following the existing law a little bit more and creating this exemption below these thresholds. But she was also putting in place more requirements for energy efficiency. You might have to be silver LEED certified, or you might have to be a passive solar. Or you had to meet the stretch code and things like that. I do think the new energy code that has been put in place starting January 1st is going to make some of what she was advocating there a little obsolete, because it basically is going to be the law of the land. So I think that those sorts of things probably could be dropped off. But the basic framework was pretty good. She did not have as much detail on this previously disturbed land. It was implied that it was infill, but it wasn't as much specificity as in the governor's piece of legislation. So, I think that's how that sort of all worked out.
And the last piece of it was the Rachel May bill only applied to affordable housing, whereas what the governor has proposed is.
I'm sorry, I forgot that part, yeah. And that was the drastically limiting part of it. So that you took something that was great, wow, this is great, but suddenly it applies to a fraction of the housing that would possibly be built in New York State. So on one hand it was great, on the other hand it was kind of became somewhat irrelevant. And that's the part that the governor's proposal does not have in it, and that's a very significant change there. There's good parts in both of them, basically, and our job, quite honestly, is to convince the governor's people that you need to take the best of both and put it into place. But I want to go back, if I can, just for a second, and Josh, you made a comment about, density is the best for the environment. And I think there's certainly logic in that. There's, but I live out in the country. We're in a rural area, and not everywhere is a city, and not everybody wants to live in a city. And we have to accommodate a broad range of housing because people need a lot of different options. And one of the things that I think it's really important to remember, and particularly the argument for people who are very concerned about energy efficiency and the environment and really focused, that's a primary focus. A new home compared to an existing home, even one that might be 30 or 40 years old, is probably 10 times more energy efficient than a 30 or 40-year-old home. So,
100-year-old home.
so if you want to be good to the environment, build as much new housing as you possibly can. I mean, that is the way to save, energy, because a new home is going to use a fraction of the amount of energy of these old homes. And I think that really needs to be hammered home and reinforced.
And I think it's one of the benefits. I'm sorry.
Can I oppose that? Because the energy embodied in a brick that's already there to merit tearing down an old house to put up a new one. You have to look at net when you're looking at energy. Yes, the new ones are more energy efficient, but to lose an old home, to tear it down and replace it to a new one, which may or may not be what you're saying, doesn't seem to be the most energy efficient.
I'm not suggesting old places that aren't savable shouldn't be renovated. I'm actually renovating 2 right now. I'm doing spec renovations on them. And I'm really focused on upgrading the insulation and the windows and the energy efficiency. I just think that's important, but I just think it's an argument that has to be reinforced that when we build something new, it is going to be, infinitely more efficient from an energy standpoint than an existing, so.
So Peter, it's early days. Do we have any sense of how local municipalities may be taking some of these suggestions? On the one hand, we've talked a lot about how relatively small some of this is. 100 units is not actually too terribly much, even for a municipality of 90,000. On the other hand, losing the cudgel is losing the cudgel, and some people might not take that kindly. And on the third hand, because we have 3 hands, because, Indian point and all that, there may actually be in some municipalities a little bit of a relief that they're not having to necessarily go through the full process for something that they know at the end of the day is probably not going to have a very big impact.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything yet. I'd be curious if others have. It doesn't seem to have struck the same kind of third rail yet as the zoning reform did. But I think this nudge approach is actually pretty interesting, because if you come in and say, you know what, I think you set your threshold at the wrong place, it just begs the question then, okay, what's the right place, right? Like, oh, wait, we can actually set our own, right? Harrison could make it 10 units today, right? White Plains could make it 200. So all of a sudden, I think it opens up that conversation, but I haven't heard kind of what the reaction has been. I haven't heard much of anything, so I don't know if others have, but.
And Josh, I know you've been working with Welcome Home Westchester with New York Neighbors. Can you talk a little bit about what the advocates are saying with regard to the governor's plan?
Sure. So we have done a lot of great work with some folks in Westchester, BRI included, to really firm up a good coalition. So it's the groups that we've been working with through the New York Neighbors groups, as well as a lot of business advocates across the state. So in particular, it's been very encouraging to see some of the folks on Long Island getting on board, including the Long Island Builders Institute, the Long Island Association. They really recognize this as something that has been a problem in their communities and are seeing and doing the courageous move to actually speak up about it, because if there's anywhere that might have a bit of a problem with these SEQA reforms, it might be on Long Island. So it's been very encouraging to actually see that support there. I'd also say, just looking at the press release, the New York State Association of Counties also came out in support, which is a big thing, as well as a couple of big unions. So there is kind of support across the board. I will say, we have been having a lot of discussion with environmental advocates, and they are aware that this is happening, and many of them are interested in dense infill housing and also feel a little bit protective about this law. But so far, none of them have come out against it, and we're feeling very optimistic that we might be able to get some support there.
Well, and also more to the point, there are also types of clean energy projects and infrastructure and conservation that would likewise be exempted by the same bill, is that right?
That's correct. So there are also exemptions, type 2 exemptions for green infrastructure that's on existing structures, which I'm actually curious to dig in a little bit more about what that means exactly, like what a structure is. But presumably that's rooftop solar, which is huge. There's also exemptions for community small-scale clean water projects, as well as, just to go into some of the other lists, public parks and shared bicycle pedestrian trails, and sewer services in disadvantaged communities. So there is kind of a lot there for different advocates to be kind of joining into the coalition. And we really want to have a big tent here, reaching across, making this a nonpartisan issue and really focusing on the fact that it is too hard to build
So we're coming close on time. We won't have time for a lengthy Q&A. The panelists will, of course, be up here and you can talk to them individually. I just wanted to go Josh through, Josh, then Peter, then Bruno. Just give us your closing thoughts. Like, where are we? What do you see coming around the pipe?
Yeah, I can start. I think this is a good first step. And I think there's also a lot to do, both on seeker specifically, but I think more broadly on what it's going to take to really address our housing crisis. And, you know, sitting here in Westchester, I know that there are definitely some towns that see density as a dirty word. But we also know that we have such a huge shortage that is affecting people here. Our, you know, WCA report that we did, Building Growth, we found that Westchester's already short 21,000 units, and that's expected to grow over the next 10 years because we aren't developing enough. And so this is a good first step at the state level to be starting to address the housing crisis. I know that politically it was very challenging with the housing compact, but I think that it is our job as advocates, and you know, my job in particular, but I'm looking to partners in this room to be making the case for why we need to be building more in our communities, and even why having some state leadership would be helpful in getting us to that goal.
Peter.
Yeah, I think structural reforms like seeker reform are incredibly important, and so I don't want to minimize that. I think it is a great conversation starter. I think if it gets implemented, it's a great first step. It's a great nudge, and then we can start having other conversations. You know, you were talking about the difference between kind of rural communities and more urban communities. So one of the benefits of seeker is that it kind of lets you draw those distinctions, except it turns out we haven't done that very well. But now we can start talking about the next things. If we can get this conversation going of why it's so important, what are the environmental topics within seeker that should be reviewed, that shouldn't be reviewed. But I'm going to agree with Josh. It is about having that conversation in our communities about why this is important, and an honest conversation about what the impacts are. Forget about seeker impacts, what the impacts are, and what we can do about them. Communities and neighbors are still going to be concerned about traffic from a new development. They're still going to be concerned about sewer and stormwater and flooding and all of these things, and they should be. Just because it doesn't get addressed in seeker doesn't mean it shouldn't be addressed. So if we can actually broaden this conversation and actually start addressing those things, seeker becomes less of an impediment, in my opinion. So, shockingly enough, the planner says we should do more planning.
And final thoughts from Bruno.
So thank you all for being here and listening to us tonight. I just think it's important to remember that societies evolve, we change. What we need today versus what we needed 10 or 20 years ago is different. Populations increase, populations shrink. You know, we used to farm to the top of the hills, now we don't, you know, now this area probably doesn't have any farming. And, you know, they evolve. And we have to be able to adapt as a civilization. And we have a profoundly broken system in this state. We are not providing for our citizens. And we have got to fix this. And that is the message that we have to make. And it isn't just dense housing. It's all options of housing that are going to be part of this solution. And this idea that, geez, you know, we're going to shrink the timeline and we're going to have the seeker only take 3 years. Give me a break. Think about this. Think about what we're doing. This is crazy. We have got to think differently. And I think what the governor's proposal is a good first step. I mean, it's an incremental step. But we have got to demand more. This idea that this is going to solve the problem is a joke. It is not gonna solve the problem. I mean, it will have a very, very incremental effect. And we have got to advocate and be active to push for a real solution to the problem, which is fixing the seeker, reforming zoning to allow more housing to be built as of right, and to shorten the timeline, not by a year, but by dramatically shorten the timeline, so that more builders come into the area. Right now, the problem is we don't have enough developers that want to develop. I mean, so basically, people are going to the south and going to communities where they can, you know, they can get a project off the ground in a year, not 10. And the risk is just too high. And what does that do? It means the cost goes up. And so I just, you know, I think I'm heightened by the fact that we got a governor, and I like her. She really is pro-housing, but she has to be much bolder, and we got to encourage her, and we got to make the case to get her to be much bolder in what she's trying to do. So thank you.
Thank you.
Let's have a big round of applause for our panel tonight. And thank you for sharing us with your ideas and your perspective and your experience. I've been a reformer on a number of different issues throughout my career, and I always think for an advocate, it comes down to three simple things, and this issue is no different. Number one, as Bill Parcells liked to say, you are what your record says you are. Josh just cited that we're about 21,000 housing units short for what we need in Westchester County. That didn't happen by accident, and that didn't necessarily happen on purpose, but you are what you are. That's who we are today. Number two, every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets. If we're here, it's because of a whole bunch of confluences and factors, but certainly secret is, as we've heard, certainly not all of it, but it's a piece of it. And if we can make that better, we should. And then the last thing I always think, every journey starts with a single step. Yes, what the governor has proposed is not as bold as what we've seen in some other states. It's not even as bold as what we've seen for the New York City fast track or some of the legislation that's in Albany already. But you've heard it again and again, it's a step, and it's a step in the right direction. And that's the only way that ultimately you take enough steps that you can get to where you need to be. So thank you all for being here tonight. Please fill out your post-program surveys. Please tell your friends, invite them to our February 19th general membership meeting, which will also be here, and check your inbox for future events. Everyone get home safe. Have a good evening.
Thank you.